What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the new horror film Companion, written and directed by Drew Hancock, starring Sophie Thatcher and Jack Quaid. And I'm going to do this review in two parts because there's one trailer that has no spoilers and one trailer that has a bunch. And I only saw the trailer with no spoilers prior to seeing the movie, and I think that had an impact on my overall kind of reaction to some of the revelations related to Sophie Thatcher's character. But if you've seen the second trailer, well, I think you're just gonna have a slightly different experience. So anyway, I'll include time codes down below, verbal warnings, the whole deal. But my official non-spoiler review for Companion is that I liked the movie, but I loved Sophie Thatcher. I think Sophie Thatcher's performance and her character, that's the best part of the movie. But my overall enjoyment of the movie was diminished by the fact that the villain of the movie, played by Jack Quaid, he's so pathetic and he's so insecure and he's so entitled and so incompetent that he basically reduces the overall threat level of the movie, which is death for a thriller or a horror movie. And I should acknowledge, my crowd was laughing uproariously and having a great time. I think my crowd enjoyed it much more than I did. I just enjoyed it because Sophie Thatcher was just giving the movie her all and just gave us an incredible performance. But I don't think it was the goal of writer-director Drew Hancock to lower the threat level. I think he was trying to insert a little bit of a social commentary, but it kind of backfires in his face because on one hand, he's trying to attack a certain personality type. On the other hand, once again, he is the villain of the movie. And if you make him so sniveling and weak that nobody really is all that afraid of him, well then, once again, the overall threat level or terror of your movie comes down considerably. But I'm starting to wonder whether or not I dislike Jack Quaid's characters or if I just might dislike Jack Quaid, because I stopped watching the show The Boys because I couldn't stand his character Huey. I mean, once again, Huey was just so weak and pathetic. I was like, all right, I just can't get invested in a show where the central character or the protagonist is a character that I just have no emotional investment in or a kind of attachment to. But here, once again, he's playing the villain, so I think we're supposed to dislike him to a degree, but I think this is one of those scenarios where the director's trying to insert a little cultural commentary, but he didn't quite do it in an effective way, and so once again, I think it undercuts the overall power of the overall movie. But I'll go into it in greater detail when I get to my spoiler section. And perhaps I'm feeling a little bit disappointed because I desperately wanted this to be a really effective, just devastating, kick-ass movie. I wanted to see it so badly, I actually went to Staten Island for the very first time ever just to see this movie one day earlier. I had the option of seeing it in Lower Manhattan tonight, or I could go to Staten Island yesterday. And I was like, you know what? I've never been to Staten Island. It's one of the 5 major boroughs of New York. I've been to Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, live in Manhattan. I was like, I need to see the 5th borough. So I actually took the subway down to the ferry, caught the ferry over, got an Uber, went down to the Alamo Drafthouse. And I should also say that I'm going to have a little section in here, which I'll also have in the time codes. The Alamo Drafthouse in Staten Island is so fucking good. I would see every single movie, year round at that Alamo Drafthouse if it wasn't just so goddamn far away. But long story short, I really wanted to see Companion, so I made the trip. The trip was, totally worth it, and the theater is incredible. It's just the movie wasn't so great. But anyway, more on the Alamo Drafthouse in the time code below. But as long as we're going spoiler-free, let's talk about some of the good stuff. The movie's 97 minutes long, and I'm starting to notice a new trend where movies are getting shorter and tighter and more economical, and I 100% approve. Last week, Flight Risk, Presence, as well as Section 31, all those movies were between 85 and 95 minutes long, and so I hope that the 90-minute movie is officially making a comeback. And this is a $10 million movie. It doesn't need to make all the money in the world to be a success. It's a New Line Cinema movie, but you can definitely tell that New Line Cinema is trying to make a movie that feels like an A24 movie or a Neon movie. It's just maybe not quite on that level, but it's R-rated, and let's just talk about Sophie Thatcher. She brings the heat. I first discovered her last year. She had a small role in Maxine, and then she had a major role in Heretic. And then in Heretic, I thought, well, let's just say she was able to trade body blows with Hugh Grant, a much more experienced actor, and she was a huge part of what made the movie work, at least the parts of the movie that did work. And I love the fact that she seems to be drawn to the horror genre. And I imagine that her agent and the agent of Mikey Madison are going to be going to war for very similar roles moving forward because they're both more or less the same age, and they both have that beautiful exotic brunette look. And so I imagine that if you have a project and you're looking for a really really cool young actress, you'd be like, all right, well, if Mikey Madison turns it down, we'll go to Sophie Thatcher or vice versa. But I'm a big fan of both actresses. And without specifying why, her role in this movie gives her abundant opportunities to really show off her range as an actress. And she's just so goddamn expressive, and like all the emotions are right there on the surface. Like, whoa, I mean, she can cry spontaneously or show rage spontaneously or show aggression spontaneously. She's just a very powerful, passionate actress in a lot of ways. And I just really respond to that pure, raw emotion. I feel like if movies are anything, if cinema is anything, it is pure, raw emotion. And as far as the filmmaking goes, I think Drew Hancock as a writer-director, I wouldn't place him on the level of Osgood Perkins or Robert Eggers or Damien Leone or Damian McCarthy or any of the other writer-directors who have emerged recently within the horror genre that have been giving us some really good stuff. But he's very solid, very reliable, and the movie is good enough where I definitely will want to see whatever he does next. And like I said, my audience was reacting very very vocally, very vociferously. So I think perhaps I'm going to be in the minority with my overall kind of disappointment in the movie. But maybe I just got myself a little bit too excited in advance. But it's 100% totally worth seeing in the theater, especially if you can go to an Alamo Drafthouse and get that first-rate experience. But as far as its particular genre is concerned, I'd say this movie is a little bit better than, but in a very similar family tree to the movie Blink Twice, which came out last year. And that was another movie that a lot of people seem to enjoy more than I did. But I just get very wary the moment I feel like the director's trying to kind of force feed me any kind of messaging of any kind. I feel like if you tell a brilliant story, well, then the messaging will be abundantly clear. Like, you don't have to kind of like massage me or manipulate me into being like more receptive to whatever your message might be. It just puts me on the defensive immediately, like, all right, well, then you're playing some sort of game here, and maybe I don't want to play that game, etc. and so forth. But I'll go into greater detail on that topic in my spoiler section. And I'm realizing now this movie is so difficult to discuss without going into spoilers, because like the surprises and twists and turns start emerging about 20 or 30 minutes into the movie. We might as well take off the kids' gloves and go into the spoiler section. So last verbal warning, 3, 2, 1. If you're still with me, you want to actually discuss this movie in greater detail. But now that we can actually discuss details, what I wanted to say earlier when I was comparing the movie to Blink Twice, instead of comparing it to Blink Twice, what I should say is that it's about as good as a really solid episode from the first season of Westworld. And I say that, with all due respect, I like the first season of Westworld quite a bit. Then the show fell off a cliff. But this movie deals with companions that are artificial beings, sex bots, robots, whatever you want to call them. And Sophie Thatcher very early on not only realizes that she's an artificial being, but that she's being manipulated by humans to commit certain crimes that'll work to their advantage. It's basically this big elaborate gathering out in the middle of fucking nowhere. It's all been basically a conspiracy in order to murder one individual and steal all his money. And like I said before, because Sophie Thatcher is just bringing the heat and just delivering this amazing performance every step of the way, I remained engaged throughout the entire story. But throughout the story, there were just so many little details that kind of irked me or annoyed me that kept me from getting like totally invested in the movie like the rest of my crowd. I think one of the main problems is that the conspirators, or the three main villains of the movie, they're all so incompetent and disorganized, and they're so goddamn annoying. When the movie first starts and you're seeing this party start to unfold, it's like, oh God, it's like, do I really have to spend like the next 2 hours with these people? It's a bunch of fucking goobers. I do not want to be at this party. And of course, I keep wanting to call him Huey, but Jack Quaid, he's doing all this annoying stuff, like telling his girlfriend, who does not yet know that she's a robot, like, oh, you got to smile, you got to be positive, what's it got to make people like you. And for some reason, in the last 10 years, there's been this small enclave of people where they feel like being told to smile or being encouraged to smile is like the equivalent of like having people like spit in your face or throw stones at you. I'm like, you know what? In my household growing up, my mother and my grandmother used to say, be attractive and be quick about it. And they meant it. There are worse things in this world than being told to smile. But there are some people who seem to think, oh my God, I'm the world's biggest victim because I'm being told to smile. But that's more or less a red herring, because at that point, we don't yet know that she's an artificial being, and it doesn't really matter. And everybody at the party also knows that, so it doesn't really matter if she wins them over or not. So it's just a little curveball to kind of throw the audience off for like the first 20 or 30 minutes. But as far as Jack Quaid's co-conspirators are concerned, we have Harvey Guillen, who I knew from What We Do in the Shadows. He's much better in What We Do in the Shadows. He's actually fucking hysterical in What We Do in the Shadows. Here, he's less interesting. He's basically just playing like this kind of chubby gay dude who you're supposed to be completely enthralled by his love affair with his own sex bot, Patrick, played by Lucas Gage. but I feel like they're just trying way too hard to kind of sell us on this romance between the character of Eli and the character of Patrick. In any event, Harvey Guillen, when it comes to his character, it's almost like the filmmaker couldn't quite make up his mind about whether or not he wanted to go all in on portraying this character as a villain or not, because once again, the filmmaker is tripping over his own messaging. He neglects the primary duty of actually making Eli come across as a compelling villain. But the other co-conspirator, Kat, is much more interesting, where she's dating this Russian oligarch who owns all the property around this lake. And the way she kind of discusses him, or the way he's portrayed, you think that he's like, like in the Russian mafia, and a rapist and a gangster and a gun dealer and just a total fucking sketchball. But as it turns out, Kat just doesn't like him. She thinks that he's a shitty boyfriend, and she's kind of helped organize this whole conspiracy to murder him and take his money just because she's annoyed by him. I was like, thank you. Like, because the movie can be a little heavy-handed in the portrayal of Jack Quaid's character as like, the toxic white male and all that kind of crap. I was like, all right, this is going to get unendurable if the whole movie is about that. But because Kat is also a pretty unlikable, unsavory character, it helps the medicine go down when, even though the character played by Jack Quaid gets the majority of the negative criticism by the movie, at least the negative character traits are kind of shovel thin amongst these three main characters of Josh, Eli, and Kat. In any case, long story short, the whole conspiracy is all about getting Sophie Thatcher's character, Iris, to murder the Russian, and so they can blame it on the sex doll and act like, oh, just like, our little device just like, it malfunctioned and killed this guy, but that way they can get away with the money scot-free. Just deactivate Iris, and it'll be the perfect crime. But where the movie gets really fun and really exciting is when Iris is like, you know what? I don't feel like being deactivated, and she just goes on the run, and she gets a hold of her boyfriend's cell phone, which allows her to control some of her settings, like making herself smarter and more resourceful and things like that. And that's when it just turns into a really, really cool chase movie with the occasional bursts of violence, which are pretty thrilling. However, this movie also falls into the trap of using digital gore at times. There's this one really, really violent scene where Patrick gets reprogrammed to come after them, and he murders a cop. But as he's murdering the cop, like, the violence is very exciting and very visceral and very impactful, but you're getting all this digital gore. And for me, every time I see digital gore or digital dismemberments or whatever, I immediately am reminded, oh, I'm watching a movie that's taking a really cheap, lame shortcut that's not effective and not convincing. Give me practical gore all day, every day. Or no gore. I'd rather see no gore than digital gore. But all the cat and mouse stuff with Sophie Thatcher's character on the run is pretty exciting. And there's some interesting technological details in terms of how you interact with these sex bots and how you can reprogram them and how you can deactivate them and all that kind of stuff. Like he definitely, the filmmaker Drew Hancock definitely thought all that stuff through. But I keep coming back to the fact that my biggest grievance is the fact that Jack Quaid's character, he's just so incompetent and ineffectual. It just, never at any point did I feel like he actually might possibly, deactivate or destroy Sophie Thatcher's character. And I'm not saying that every character needs to be as like rugged and masculine as a character actor like Rip Torn in order to be credible as a real threat. But he has to at least pretend, and forgive me, I'm going to be a little crude here for a second, but Jack Quaid has to at least pretend on some level that he might have something resembling like an average-sized penis or bigger before I'm going to believe the fact that he actually is capable of like violence or murder or killing or betrayal or any of that sort of thing. He's just such a dweeb, such a weenie, that it just took me out of the movie. And if you're not afraid of like the main source of evil in the movie, well, then once again, the whole movie just comes down. And he spends so much of the movie complaining about how he deserves love, or he deserves money, or he deserves this, or he deserves that, and the whole world's out to get him because of who he is. But at a certain point, it started to feel like Drew Hancock has an idea of a certain type that's out there that he's trying to criticize. But if those people exist, I don't really know them. And so once again, it's like, I feel like this is a movie designed to attack a person that the director perceives as being a societal epidemic, but that just might not be the case. But at least all three of the co-conspirators have their fair share of negative characteristics. But it seems like the social criticism is mostly directed towards the dreaded straight white male played by Jack Quaid. But for me, any sort of cultural commentary or criticism that might have been directed toward this character, if it was intended for me in any way, shape, or form, it fell upon deaf ears because I don't relate to Jack Quaid in any way, shape, or form. And I fucking hate his character in every single show or movie that I see him in. I guess the final test is going to be that movie Novocaine coming out in March, because by the time I see that, if I hate him in The Boys, and if I hate him in Companion, and I hate him in Novocaine, maybe I just don't like Jack Quaid. But I love his father, Dennis Quaid. Dennis Quaid, I grew up on his movies. Like, one of the first movies I saw in the theater was Dreamscape with Dennis Quaid. Love Dennis Quaid. But I just feel like Jack Quaid is a one-note actor. He's got his one thing that he does, and that one thing that he does I don't find entertaining or interesting. And so, yeah, maybe Novocaine will be my final Jack Quaid movie, unless he just has like some great, departure moving forward. He works with a great director. Is like, we're gonna shake off all these old tropes that you've been relying upon, and we're gonna completely reinvent you moving forward. So I feel like he is due for a little reinvention as an actor. And so I think the movie's going to feel a little disposable overall to some people who just want a little bit more of like a hardcore experience. But I think as a sample of the work and the talent of Sophie Thatcher, she is definitely going to book more work moving forward. She totally steals the show. She's absolutely fantastic. And so as a new fan of Sophie Thatcher, I enjoyed the movie. I just didn't love the movie. And I went into this movie absolutely hoping to love it, which is why I took this giant trek to Staten Island. So let me real quick just talk about the trip to Staten Island and how cool the Alamo Drafthouse is over at Staten Island. So even though Staten Island is technically one of the 5 boroughs of New York, it's hard to get to this theater. I took the subway to the southern tip of Manhattan, hopped on the ferry, which was very cool. I'd seen it in Spider-Man Homecoming, or one of the Spider-Man movies, when it's splitting apart and he has to kind of pull it back together. But I've been seeing the Staten Island ferry for years. Finally got on it, and what's really cool is as you're riding over, you basically go right by Lady Liberty, and you have these like police boats riding along with you. I don't know if that's always the case or not. In any case, very enjoyable ride over there, and I got over there. And Staten Island is cool. It's very hilly, and anyway, I took an Uber down to the Alamo Drafthouse, and this theater was just enormous. So I walk in there. First and foremost, they got arcade games that are available for free, and I got to play the original Ninja Gaiden from the late 80s. It was released as Shadow Warriors in Europe. But I was like, God damn, you mean I can play Ninja Gaiden for free? I was like, I might just move in here. And because the game was set up as free to play, no matter how many times you die, you can just keep plowing on ahead. And in a weird, strange, out-of-body meta moment, at the start of the second phase, the main character arrives at Staten Island. So anyway, it was just icing on the cake to the whole experience. But then as I was walking back to the theater, or walking back to my screening room, there were hundreds of ninja posters and kung fu posters, and just like every Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee or American ninja movie that you've ever heard of. It was nothing but martial arts posters as far as the eye could see. I was like, all right, that's really fucking cool. I went into the men's room, and inside the bathrooms, you have pages from different comic books that I remember from the 1980s, plastered all around. I was like, the decoration is so goddamn cool. And I just love the idea that any kid going to that theater is getting exposed to, the best martial arts movies and the best comics and blah, blah, blah. But where the Alamo Drafthouse really shines is with the weird programming they cook up before a movie. And sometimes they just show you weird clips and weird videos and that sort of thing. And sometimes they cook up things that are tangentially related to the movie, but you never quite know until the movie gets started. But they showed one music video, which was a song from the party sequence in the movie. And so that made sense once the party sequence emerged. But what really caught me off guard was this absolutely bizarre documentary which they played up beforehand from 1986 called How Can I Tell If I'm Really in Love? There are times where I look back on the 80s and I'm like, how did I get out of that decade with my sanity intact? Or who knows, maybe I didn't. But when I'm reminded of some, like, we all think back to the 80s, like, oh, like, we had movies like Blade Runner and The Thing, like the 80s were so cool. But sometimes you got to see shit like, how can I tell if I'm really in love? Which is just so awful and so weird, but I couldn't take my eyes off it because you have Ted Danson, Justine Bateman, and Jason Bateman.
We've all got the same question. How can I tell if I'm really in love?
Basically posing hypothetical questions about how can you tell if you're really in love, followed by interviews with like high school and college kids talking about their experiences with love. Look it up on YouTube. It is totally deranged. You will turn it off after a couple minutes because it's just so loathsome and the tone is so sugary sweet. But once again, only at the Alamo Drafthouse do you get to discover like these real, like the truly obscure esoterica of forgotten eras of the past. But overall, I think that's all I've got to say about Companion. It works as sci-fi. It works as a thriller. It's definitely entertaining. It's definitely easy to get invested in. I liked it. I didn't love it. But I love Sophie Thatcher, and I was hoping for the best movie experience humanly possible, but who knows, maybe The Monkey in a few weeks' time will deliver the really visceral, hardcore, intense experience that I was hoping for from Companion. And there's some other stuff on the horizon. There's that Valentine's Day horror movie coming up, but anyway, I'm seeing that next Thursday. Anyway, there's a bunch of cool horror on the horizon. Sinners looks awesome. The second trailer came out yesterday, and I thought the trailer looked absolutely fantastic. And of course, we have 28 Years Later coming out in June, so I still have high hopes for the horror genre in calendar year 2025. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed this review. If so, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.